Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Creemee Cast number 8, Friday at 4. I'm here with Guy Page, and we think we have a pretty good show lined up for you today. How are you today, Guy?
Doing great, Paul.
Welcome to Bean Studios once again. I think we're slowly making some good critiques and tweaks, and we're finally getting this thing down. But there's some changes I'd like to make, but we'll get there. We're getting there. What do you think?
Well, we invite everyone's feedback.
Yes.
How do they get a hold of us, Paul?
Oh, that's right. Well, if you're watching live on YouTube, you can write into the chat right now. You can write to us immediately. You can DM me on any of my social medias, which maybe some of you are watching live on my Twitter. You can write me there, or you can email us at Vermont Daily Chronicle. What is the email of the Vermont Daily Chronicle, Guy?
news@vermontdailychronicle.com.
Okay. So if you want to give us feedback and you maybe know something or a thing or two about this, I'd love to hear from you. So anyway, what do you have today, Guy? What's going on here in Vermont?
We've got 3 stories.
Okay.
The first one, I've got to warn you, Paul, it's happening again. Serious crime with some political overtones took place in Burlington. Once again, it looks like the work of a white, gun-crazy, out-of-town liberal.
Oh, interesting.
Got to say it. I know it goes against the narrative, but it's true. So you may remember that in late November, 3 young Palestinian men were gunned down in Burlington, and our politicians and the media quickly declared it to be an act of hate against Palestinians. And we're all wondering, boy, who did this? Who did this to these guys? Lots of social media fingers being pointed at supporters of Israel and former President Donald Trump. Then, police arrested Jeffrey Eaton.
Jason. Is it Jason Eaton?
Jay Eaton.
I believe it's Jason. But
you may be right. A former environmental studies student, climate warrior, anti-capitalist, staunch Unitarian, and supporter of Hamas, according to his various somewhat rambling and often chaotic social media statements. Also someone, police said, with a history of moving around and threatening people with guns. He's now awaiting trial. Then, last week, someone set fire to the outer doorway of Senator Bernie Sanders' office in Burlington. Well, surely, this time we were seeing the work of these shadowy MAGA warriors. Social media commenters said, including several on Vermont Daily Chronicle, but certainly all over the place. It was the fingers were being pointed at you-know-who. Well, wrong again. Police arrested a California man who does not fit the MAGA mold any better than Eaton does. A year ago, police found Shant Sogomonian with a Russian-made AK-47 in his car, hardly the militia's firearm of choice, and a copy of a book called How to Blow Up a Pipeline. This is a very popular book among the I'd say the hard left of the climate change folks. A blurb about this book. The science on climate change has been clear for a long time now, yet despite decades of appeals, mass street protests, peaceful demonstrations, we're still facing a booming fossil fuel industry, rising seas, rising emission levels, and a rising temperature. With the stakes so high, why haven't we moved beyond peaceful protest? So this author of this book, and also a saboteur of SUV tires and coal mines, Andreas Malm, makes an impassioned call for the climate movement to escalate its tactics in the face of ecological collapse. We need, he argues, to force fossil fuel extraction to stop with our actions, with our bodies, and by diffusing and destroying its tools. We need, in short, this blurb says, to start blowing up some oil pipelines. So that's this guy's reading material. So it kind of makes you wonder, if they got this wrong, what else is the woke crowd getting wrong?
Very good question. One might think a lot, but I don't know, Guy. maybe I'm wrong about that.
Those are probably the only two things.
That's probably it, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, apropos of absolutely nothing, I brought in a coffee mug today that it's from the Rutland Tribune. And the Rutland Tribune was a generally conservative newspaper being published as kind of an alternative to the Rutland Herald. It was a weekly paper. And I think the reason I brought it this week is it was published by my old buddy Lou Verricchio, who is a former NASA sort of scientist, PR guy, and he must have been absolutely geeking out over the eclipse this week. And so in honor of his former newspaper, which also, their slogan was something that we can go along with too, which is for the other side of the story. And that's kind of what we try to do at the Vermont Daily Chronicle. Is there are stories that are being well covered. For example, the eclipse, I got to say, was very well covered this week. We didn't really do much on it. And I think one of the reasons we didn't was we knew everyone else was. And there was plenty of maybe more mundane earthly news that wasn't being covered that we really thought we had to focus on. So if you were looking for more eclipse coverage from the Chronicle this week, sorry, but that's why we didn't have it. However, I want to make up for that a little bit right now. Paul, you've got some thoughts on the eclipse.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, are you talking Tesla? The Teslas?
Well, sort of what we were talking about before. Go for it.
Sure. Well, first and foremost, thought the eclipse was beautiful. And yes, we did not cover it here at the Chronicle. I think because we both agreed everybody else is doing this. Let's just enjoy it and just take it in, right? However, Rob Roper, a contributor to the Chronicle, but he writes his own Substack, Behind the Lines. Highly recommend, by the way, that you go and subscribe to Rob Roper's Substack. He wrote a piece yesterday talking about the EVs. And did you heard about this?
Yes, I did.
So we were talking about this yesterday at the State House, actually, with some of the legislators. So a lot of people, as you may know, came to Vermont for this eclipse, 150,000 plus, they're saying. Well, apparently, some of these people drove Teslas here from Boston, Connecticut, wherever they come from. And they must have thought we just had an abundance of chargers up here because, we're Vermont, right? We're green, we're environmentally conscious. Everybody drives EVs in Vermont. Well, not true. Unfortunately, some of these people that came found themselves in a pretty sticky situation. So I pulled a quote from Rob's story, and this is a visitor at the eclipse who, this is what she writes. She writes, "I had to rush back because I noticed the battery on my Tesla was running low and all the charging stations at J Peak were taken," said Monica Livesey. When the Livesey family found a charging station in St. Johnsbury, there were lines of electric vehicles dozens deep. She writes, I got there with only 1 mile to find out where about, I'll start this quote over. I got there with 1 mile only to find out there were about 60 cars waiting to be charged, Livesey said. The Livesey family waited for more than 4 hours to charge their Tesla, and they arrived at their Wakefield home at 4 a.m. on Tuesday. Isn't that quite something?
Oh, live and learn.
Well, I wonder. I think it's. I think we definitely seem to be excited about EVs here in Vermont, right? But nobody seems to want to talk about like the potential of, let's say and Rob wrote about this in his Substack.
He did. Let's
imagine. I don't know. Maybe we had a power outage here in Vermont because of a. Right, I know.
Come on.
Well, let's imagine. Okay, we have a power outage, and because of a natural disaster, right? Mm-hmm. Or maybe it is a natural disaster. Maybe it's some type of climate-related storm, and the power goes out, or maybe we need to evacuate the state for some reason, or evacuate parts of the state, right? And we can't do that if we're all driving electric vehicles, right? I mean, this is a really good showcase. This is a good chance for Tesla to showcase, hey, there might be some problems with everybody driving EVs, and we're going to need tons and tons and tons of chargers if everybody's going to be driving these vehicles, right? So, I read Rob's story or his Substack, and I thought it was really good because he's kind of touching on that electric vehicles. They're definitely maybe something we should be talking about. We should be considering them as a viable option, but there's some problems with them. And for whatever reason, nobody in Vermont really seems to want to address that, right? Everybody takes this story and they're not really taking it seriously, I think. I mean, the fact that there's potentially 60 cars lined up waiting to charge your vehicle and you're waiting for 4 hours to plug in, I mean, that's pretty serious. What are your thoughts, Guy?
So I was out for a run on Berlin Pond this week, and a fellow pulled up while I was stretching out, and he's driving a Hyundai EV. And I thought, actually, nice looking car. It was an all-wheel drive, kind of a hatchback, sort of like, imagine a Subaru Crosstrek that's all electric and is a Hyundai. Nice looking car. And I asked him, so what does one of those cost? Because my first Hyundai I bought was an Elantra, and it was maybe $13,000 or something like that. He said, "Oh, it's about $56,000." I thought, wow, maybe I haven't bought a real new car in a while, Paul. Maybe that's the problem, but that's an awful lot of money, man.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, for a really what amounts to a compact SUV. And I guess I hope that it's a good winter car. Being an all-wheel drive SUV, it probably is.
Yeah.
They are doing better with that. I'm really nervous about any time, especially the government decides, not the market, but the government decides that we're going to put all of our eggs in one energy basket.
Yes.
It's going to be all electricity. Your heat, your transportation, your everything. It's all going to be electricity. Well, what happens when, as almost happened, I think it was 3 winters ago, we had that polar vortex.
That's right.
And nobody knows, except for the people who are in the know, which is the people running the grid and some utility people, how Vermont came within hours of brownouts and blackouts. We were so close. If there was one bridge that they looked like it was going to be closed and people couldn't be delivering fuel over that bridge or something like that, there was one thing that went right. It broke right, and because of that, the grid was able to continue. It was that close. It was down to one thing. And I don't know if it was like a coal delivery. I think that's what it was. It was like a coal barge or something like that was able to get through, and there's a possibility it might not be able to, because when we're really hurting, we burn coal.
Yeah.
Although we don't anymore. Actually, a few weeks ago, I think they finally closed the last coal one. But for backup power, we burn diesel fuel and all sorts of fossil fuels. And if we don't have those, because people want to close them or whatever, it's trouble. Which does kind of bring me to my next story.
Sure.
And
John, we do have a few replies.
Please
let me share. We love when you guys write in the chat. By the way, that's like one of the best parts of this. John Q. Public writes, Vermont, a test bed for every World Economic Forum globalist agenda, and the residents gobble it up like candy. Well, not all of us do, thank you very much. Timothy Page writes, the saboteurs like Mom tend to damage the environment more than they help it. Libby Moyer, she writes, wonder why this guy would burn down the door at Senator Sanders' office. What does that mean and show about, what does that do about anything? We have a quite a few more Here's one from Libby Moyer again. She writes, what happens when you're on 91 and your EV runs out of power? Can't just get a gas can. Who comes and how long to get your boost? It's a very good question. And here's another one from Bill Huff. According to Toyota, you can build a 97 hybrid vehicles compared to one EV for the same carbon footprint to build them. Interesting comment. And I just, before we move from this subject, the EVs and from gas-powered vehicles, I mean, I just don't understand why Vermont legislators and California legislators, the Democratic Party possibly as a whole, why are they so ideologically driven to force us all into vehicles that they think we need? I don't understand. I know that they're concerned about climate change, and there are concerns that are valid. But we need to be thinking of the negative externalities, too, of forcing everybody into electric vehicles, because there are them. Why are we not acknowledging them? I don't understand that. It just doesn't make any sense to me. But if there's any of them out there listening, and they do consume any of our content, we'd love to hear why. Why are you so adamant that all Vermonters must be within your confines? So anyhow, if you want to move on, I'm happy to.
Actually, let's stay on that. First thing I want to get back to, we're going to answer that first, and then we're going to get back to what Libby Moyer asked about why they burned down the door. I think there are two main reasons why the push is so strong in Vermont for electricity and renewable power and carbon reduction. The first one is there are a lot of people who are absolutely sold on the idea that the greatest existential threat to the world is climate change. And therefore, Vermont, even though they will concede that no matter what we do in Vermont, it's not going to make much difference. They will concede that, but they will say Vermont must be a quote-unquote beacon of hope, I believe is how one legislator phrased it. A beacon of hope to the rest of the world. So there's that. And there's also, and this simply cannot be ignored, there's the profit motive. That you have an industry, solar industry, wind power, I think mostly at this point the solar, that makes its money has sold its artificially high rates that utilities must pay. If you can build one of these things, utilities must buy the power by law. And it's at a much higher rate than the open market, 99% of the time. And that whole premise is climate change.
That's right.
So I was at a meeting once where the head of Renewable Energy Vermont was telling legislators, look, we've got to push for this latest change, whatever it was, increasing their access, keeping their rates high, whatever it was, some financial thing. And she said, just keep pushing climate change. Climate change, climate change. So there's no doubt that there is a money thing going on here too.
Absolutely.
And which doesn't necessarily make it wrong. I mean, people make a good buck doing the right thing all the time. But they can also lose track of what really matters and just really be hucksters who are selling something so they can make a ton of money. And frankly, a lot of them have made a ton of money. Whatever they truly believe about climate change, there's been an awful lot of money made in renewable power. And what they are slowly doing, and they started it with Vermont Yankee, which is essentially getting rid of the competition. If you have a carbon-free power source out there that's really affordable, that's reliable, that's your worst nightmare. Hey, if you're a Red Sox fan, please, will the Yankees plane just fall out of the sky? You know, I mean, not really, but if you're really a fanatic, that's sort of how you think. And you want to get rid of the competition. If you're a car dealer that sells Chevys, you're sort of hoping the Ford guy goes out of business.
Sure.
It's like that.
Yeah, it does seem like there's a this is something we've talked about a lot too. It seems a lot of the times people will shape their beliefs based around their employment.
And, so true.
Maybe you and I are possibly guilty of that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everybody is to some degree. We all got to make a living. And maybe you'll tell yourself that you believe something that you maybe deep down you kind of know, but you don't really want to go there because maybe it's unpopular too, by the way. Yeah. It's a little bit controversial, perhaps.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And it really is about employment for a lot of us.
Yeah, people vote their pocketbook. And,
that's right.
and so many people are employed by the government and other things while they're voting their pocketbook. So what Libby Moyer said, why do he burn the door? I suppose he couldn't get into the office. But why did he take on Sanders in particular? There are people, if you look on social media, Bernie Sanders is not completely popular with the really hard left environmental people.
For your financial support.
Yes, indeed. And so there are people who are on the extreme edge of the climate change people, the people who are buying books called How to Blow Up a Pipeline, who think he's kind of a sellout. So, and there are also, a lot of these people think that, direct action, talk is cheap. It's time for some direct action. So they do something direct and attention-getting, like torching a senator's door. Now, this guy isn't talking. He lowered it up right away once they pulled him out of a hotel in South Burlington somewhere. But I do know, I've been looking around on the internet, and I'm not really quite ready to reveal it yet, but there's other evidence out there that says he is a very ideologically driven person.
Well, it's a theme right now, isn't it? It's not just this guy. I mean, we see across the country these climate protests where people are blocking the roads. You see our favorite
how dare you,
Greta Thunberg, the famous Greta Thunberg. I knew you would like that one. But you see her getting arrested, and I mean, it's all, of course, performative. And we see this happening all over the world, especially in Europe and the United States. And honestly, it's so pervasive and it's destructive. Like, right. You see this, there's this just ideologically driven hysteria, really, where people are willing to do extreme things. And it's like, lighting up the Bernie Sanders office door. I mean, it is interesting, right, that it's coming from a lefty, right? Nobody wants to see that or admit that, by the way.
Or Libby, it could just be that it was a full moon.
It could be the eclipse.
Right. Blame it on the eclipse.
Well, here's Thomas Koch writes, Paul, you just don't understand. Our legislators know what's best for us, and for you to question their decisions is an insult to their intelligence. Thank you, Thomas Koch, for watching. I'm glad to know that you're out there.
Well, he was a former legislator, so he should know, right? I mean, yeah.
That's no burn on Tom. No.
That's true. And he did wonderful service there. Have I brought up the part about the don't look now, but the property tax revolt continues?
No, you haven't. We should talk about that.
Well, it does. And this is in the last 5 minutes here. We all remember, those of us who are paying attention, on March 5th, how 30 towns, 30 school districts voted down their school budgets. 30 of about 90 school budget jurisdictions. 1 out of 3. Reason, of course, being that the statewide property tax was going to go up about 20%. And even districts in like Montpelier and places like that said, actually, no, that's just getting a little out of control. So the districts who were voted down had to go back to the drawing board, get out their pencils, make a smaller budget, and hope the voters went for it. And I think there are a lot of people in the State House who were pretty hopeful that it would, because usually what happens is if a budget gets voted down, the school board comes back, they make a few modest changes, and then it gets approved. That's what happens, right? That's not happening this year. There have been, we had our reporter, Michael Bolosky, do as thorough a check as he could to see how many districts have voted on a second time. And he found 6. 5 of those 6 have voted down their school budgets a second time. Many more scheduled for the next couple of weeks. We'll be tracking that to see how it goes. The districts that have voted no are Georgia and South Burlington, both of those by fairly narrow margins. And then St. Johnsbury and the Lyndonville area schools, it's called the Kingdom East School District, just this week, they voted no. And in the Kingdom East, the vote was 652 no, 318 yes. That's more than 2 to 1. 2 to 1. That's like Donald Trump bad votes in Vermont, right? That a school budget was as popular as Donald Trump. That's really what that means, what that number means.
That's actually quite an impressive comparison.
Well, what it means is that school budgets right now are not terribly popular. And just last night, Slate Valley, which is down on it's a district that has Orwell, Benson, Castleton, and Fairhaven, I think. It's on the Addison County, Rutland County line, straddles that. They voted and they rejected their budget by 2 to 1 margin.
Wow.
So the last 2 have been by 2 to 1. And it was perhaps not exactly 2 to 1. It was 544 in favor, 947 against. A rather decisive vote. And the superintendent's saying, well, we understand this news may be disappointing for some as it is for us, considering there are factors beyond our control, et cetera, et cetera. But the really telling fact that Mike Bolosky, our reporter, pointed out was that the per pupil spending in Slate Valley is already very low compared to the state. It's $11,000 per student compared to about $20,000 statewide. So this is a school district that had already been shaving their expenses, and still the voters said, forget it. And there are people I've spoken to who think that where this is all going is 87%. It's going to be the 87% solution. And that means that if a district doesn't have an approved budget by July 1, they are allowed to spend 87% of their current budget. And they have to go out and borrow that money, just the way if I'm broke, I go to the bank and say, please, can you give me a line of credit or something and of course there's interest involved in that. But there's the thought that there may be a lot of school districts where the voters are thinking, yeah, I kind of like that sound of only spending 87% because maybe they'll get serious about spending, cutting spending. And I'm not saying that I personally think that's a great solution to have to do that, but I understand the frustration that people are feeling because it just seems like the spending is really out of control. And on top of that, well, what kind of time do we have, Paul?
We have plenty of time. I mean, it's 4:30, but we can continue talking. We still have viewers. People are paying attention. So
okay,
we can go on as long as you like, Guy.
Are people commenting?
Oh yeah, people are commenting.
Okay.
Timothy Page writes, the school budget is amazing, just the best. I know it personally, in quotation marks. Bill Huff, Judy Taranovich writes to Bill Huff, you can also put almost 3 propane buses on the road for every 1 electric bus.
That's true.
Timothy Page also writes, we need a moderate revolution, but nobody wants to stand on a soapbox and speak calmly. Then he writes, too much renewable. Voltage, revolt.
Okay.
Very funny, Timothy. Good one.
Yeah, I raised him well.
Yes, you did.
So what we'll be talking about next week is and this is, people aren't just upset with the funding of schools, I think. There are academic and instructional problems, behavior problems, absenteeism problems that are underreported and very severe.
Yes.
And I believe we'll be talking about that next week, but just a little bit of a heads up. Absenteeism before the pandemic in Vermont schools was about 11%. A report out this week said it is at about 29%. Think about that. Almost 3 times as high of an absenteeism rate. And
it's pretty incredible.
Basically, kids who just didn't come back to school.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a lot of things going on there. And the other one is that out of one particular Addison County school district, they've seen a huge spike in student violence, in disruptive behavior, and in just mental illness. And the strange thing, the scary thing, Paul, is that the bubble there is first grade.
Mm.
You have an out of control situation in one particular Addison County district in first grade. And I think the thought is it's not just Addison County.
Well, I can tell from some people that I've spoke to that work in school districts around this area, they do say that it's not even like it was when I was in school.
Sure.
And I knew when I was coming out of the school system, I was always thinking, you were seeing around you declining population of students. The behavior was getting bad. I mean, I was pretty bad as a senior. I was maybe not as well behaved as I could have been. And it's just continually, from what I understand, gotten worse and worse and worse. And the spending goes up and up and up. And we're all wondering what's going on here. And I don't think it's a bash on teachers. It's not a bash on people that work in the schools, but we're all just trying to figure out, we have so many financial problems here in Vermont. And this seems to be a really, really important one for a lot of voters this year.
That's right.
I can see that a lot of voters are definitely taking this very seriously. And I think that's good. I mean, we need engagement. And, like Rob Roper has said before too, it's the complexity of the school budget funding and how it's structured within the state legislature and how that translates to your property taxes. It's not a feature, I think. It's not a bug of the system, he said. It's a feature.
Right.
They depend on your confusion. They depend on your helplessness and inability to understand the complexity, which seems to be kind of their MO, right? I mean, you can talk about just the property tax thing and school budgets, but every idea that they have, it's like this, well thought, academic, ideologically driven idea where we're going to really, do something incredible, but you can't even explain it so that like your teachers, right, for example, can understand it very clearly, or your voters. Do you know what I'm getting at?
I do. And I think that's a subject for another day.
Sure.
I want to encourage people, if you're watching, if you haven't subscribed to our page or liked it, Paul, how do they do that?
Well, you can go to, obviously, if you're watching this live on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button. Please like the show. If you're watching this on Facebook, I ask that you stop watching on don't stop watching on Facebook, but watch it on YouTube so you can participate. Actually, you can participate in the comments if you're watching live on Facebook. But you please go like the YouTube, subscribe to the YouTube page. Follow me on Twitter, follow Guy on Twitter, follow us on all of our social medias, but definitely, if you're not already subscribed, and not just to our YouTube, but also the Chronicle, we ask that you become a sustaining subscriber. We would love to have your financial support, like Bernie.
Once again, asking for your financial support.
So if you want to support the Vermont Daily Chronicle, we really any way that you can do it for free, but we'd love you not to also. So what do you have, Guy?
Well, I I think what we have is a good show.
I think we did.
And thank you, Paul, and thank you, listeners. Thank you, watchers. And see us here again next Friday at 4.